Welcome back to the legacy of Ludvig Nobel, the unsung architect of peace through profit. In the first two episodes, we covered his early life and his biggest successes in business. Now, in episode 3, we'll look at the 1880s, the later part of his life, when he reached the height of his power. But personal health problems started to take over. At only age 50, Ludwig entertained Russian empires while dealing with his worsening angina. And that's a painful heart condition. His death in 1888 helped inspire his brother Alfred to create the Nobel Peace Prize and other awards. This episode wraps up his story, focusing on his strength even as things got harder. Take a moment to honor this overlooked hero. In the mid-1880s, Baku was a busy, dirty hub of oil production, like the beating heart of Russia's energy boom. And Branobel was in full control. It produced a quarter of all of Russia's crude oil, with tankers shipping it along the Volga and Black Sea routes, and refineries running nonstop day and night. At 55, with gray hair starting to show, Ludwig expanded Villa Petrolea into a thriving community of 500 homes, a real model town where workers could save money, take out loans, and build better lives. The upgrades were forward-thinking. The hospital got new sections with operating rooms, and a technical school taught rig workers English and math. Graduates went on to jobs in Branobel's remote Siberian sites or even started their own companies in places like Riga. And the company's Sparkasse Bank, it grew fast. Deposits tripled, creating a credit system that loaned money to local winemakers. Ludwig checked the reports every 3 months and smiled at the success stories. A widow buying a country house, a young man heading to Berlin for studies. But he knew not everyone shared in the wealth. The poorer parts of Baku, called Blacktown, were full of slums where workers outside of Branobel's influence went hungry despite the oil riches. Ludwig stepped up with quiet charity, unnamed gifts to orphanages, and new water pumps to Azeri villages. As a natural connector, his ability to speak multiple languages helped calm tensions among diverse teams of different faiths and backgrounds. But problems got worse. Rivals stepped up their sabotage, blowing up pipelines and poisoning wells, which kept Ludwig on constant watch day and night. The worst hit in 1886, a late-night explosion on the Bibi Ebat pipeline sent oil shooting out like a volcano, with flames so big they could be seen from across the border in Persia. Ludwig rushed there by sunrise and led teams of workers with just buckets to fight the fire, while private detectives he hired from St. Petersburg tracked the attackers back to a group backed by the Rothschild family. His comeback was quiet but smart. He tipped off newspapers about the rivals, secret price-fixing deals, which hurt their reputation and shook up their business. To protect things, he added more guards and early warning alarms, but all the pressure showed on his face, carving deeper lines from his worry. He'd spend sleepless nights in his simple house in Baku, surrounded by a noisy oil derrick, pacing back and forth with a chessboard in hand, plotting his next moves like a battlefield commander. His dear wife, Idla, kept begging him to take breaks at the relaxing hot springs in the Caucasus Mountains nearby, but his sense of duty held him in place. In 1887, the brothers mended their family rift. Alfred, who had grown distant because of the oil business, was diverting time and money from his inventions, finally visited Baku. During some of his refinery tours, the brothers made up, and Alfred raised a glass to Ludwig's Empire of Light. This trip sparked joy. Alfred, the serious inventor, marveled at the massive Zoroaster tanker, and he like geeked out over these burner designs like a kid. Even at Villa Petrolea, which featured caviar and vodka and stories of Emil's death and their father's risks, they were rebuilding this very important bond. Alfred promised more money. Ludwig shared plans for blast-proof casings. Robert joined in, and the three sketched growth ideas on napkins. And this newfound unity, it eased Alfred's lingering doubts about the oil venture. And in the months that followed, his letters from Paris grew warmer and more supportive, describing the gritty oil business as the grounding force that stabilized their family's volatile explosives work, providing steady profits to fund his dynamite innovations without the constant risk of lab disasters or market swings. For Ludwig, it was a relief. Old photos even capture him at ease, arm around Alfred, framed by a derrick at sunset. In spring of 1888, Ludwig reached the height of his success and suffering. Tsar Alexander III, Russia's powerful leader, visited Baku in a grand parade down the oil-covered streets. Though weak from illness, Ludwig hosted him proudly at Branobel. And the Tsar, to say the least, he was amazed at the company's pipelines, the longest in Europe, and he dined at the Villa Petrolea's grand halls and awarded Ludwig the Order of Saint Vladimir, a high honor. The event was like a royal show. Cossack guards rode with thunder, the Tsar in his fur-lined coat, surrounded by princes. And Ludwig led the tour, explaining tanker pumps and burner tech. The Tsar nodded, and he was really impressed by the yields matching even America's best. At the banquet, cheers rang out. To Nobel, the light of the empire. Ludwig replied steadily, "Your empire's light is our forge." And amid the banquet's thunderous applause, Tsar Alexander III pinned the Order of Saint Vladimir. This is a gleaming golden cross on a crimson ribbon, one of Russia's highest honors for service to the empire, directly to Ludwig's chest. It wasn't just a symbol of royal favor. It sealed Branobel's dominance over the vital Volga River shipping lanes, granting exclusive rights to transport oil from the Caspian ports to the heart of Russia's markets and beyond. A quiet coup that would flood Europe with Nobel kerosene for years to come. Baku celebrated wildly. Parades and folk dances, fireworks. It was just lighting up the Caspian Sea. For the foreign workers, it proved their hard life abroad was worth it. And for Ludwig, it was the ultimate validation. From a poor steerage boy to advisor of kings. But the high from the Tsar's visit didn't last. During the tour, Ludwig's angina hit hard, like a tight clamp on his chest, forcing him to slip away quietly. Doctors said it was advanced arteriosclerosis, worn down by years of oil fumes and nonstop stress. And he told his wife Idla, the machine outlasts its maker. He started handing off work, sending son Emil to manage the oil fields and young Ludwig Jr. to handle the books, training them with their tough love. Facing his own end, he thought deeply about his legacy, dictating memoirs to a helper and focusing on lasting gifts like schools and workers and stories of thanks. Hoping for relief, he and his wife Iadla sailed to sunny Cannes on the French Riviera. The trip started well. Train to Marseille, then a yacht to Blue Bays, where Ludwig, he loved to sketch his new park ideas for Baku. And palm-shaded walks and bouillabaisse dinners perked him up with arm-in-arm strolls and talk of grandkids. But on April 12th, 1888, at age of only 56, a stroke struck mid-chat and he fell. And the last thing he said, whispering, "The light," as his heart gave out from the umpire's heavy load. Doctors confirmed a brain hemorrhage, the final blow from his angina. Word spread like wildfire. Urgent telegrams raced to St. Petersburg, while Baku ground to a halt in grief, flags drooping at half-mast, oil derricks falling eerily silent under the Caspian Sea. His funeral, held at Smolensky Cemetery in St. Petersburg, where Ludwig's remains buried to this day, was a hushed yet moving affair, a solemn procession winding down the Grand Nevensky Prospect, flanked by factory workers in somber black, his sons shouldering the simple oak coffin with quiet resolve. Etched on his gravestone, it said, "Engineer of Progress," a fitting tribute to the man who turned wilderness into wealth. The brothers' sons stepped up to lead Branobel, and under Emmanuel's steady guidance, production soared 50% by 1890. Yet for all the triumphs that followed, Ludwig's absence carved an irreplaceable void, a shadow over the empire he'd illuminated. It was cruel irony. French newspapers ran obituaries about Ludwig, but they mixed him up with Alfred and called him the Death Merchant, a harsh nickname Alfred had earned from selling dynamite. When Alfred read this mistaken obituary about himself while staying in Avignon, it shocked him deeply. That moment planted the seed for the Nobel Prizes, inspired in part by living in his brother's overlooked shadow. The worst was an angry article in Le Figaro shouting, "Dynamite's fiend silenced." It led Alfred reeling in horror during his quiet retreat. But that fear turned into determination. He thought, if I've made a business out of death, then let me make prizes out of life. He met with lawyers and wrote his will, setting up awards in fields like physics, chemistry, and peace, all funded by the family's oil money. In the end, Ludwig's steady example helped spark Alfred's path to making things right, redirecting the profits from explosives and war into honors that celebrate harmony and progress. Ludwig's final years weren't a fade to black. They were a refining fire, distilling his life's work into something pure and powerful. An empire locked in, workers lifted to their best selves, and families unbreakable. He didn't just refine crude oil into fuel. He polished the very essence of progress, making industry not only efficient, but most importantly, truly humane. From the roaring oil fires of Baku to the quiet shores of Cannes, his story lights our way. Innovative with a conscience, led with a heart. Thanks for joining me on this three-part journey. I really appreciate it. And it's only appropriate to end this last episode here with an epilogue, how the Russian Revolution ended the Nobel Empire. You have to remember, in the early 1900s, Ludwig's son, Emanuel Karl and Ludwig Jr., kept Branobel strong. By the 1910s, it was a giant, owning huge oil fields in Baku, a fleet of tankers on the Caspian Sea, refineries from St. Petersburg to the Black Sea, and Villa Petrolea as a model of progress. The family's Russian assets, factories, ships, homes, and pipelines were worth billions and powered lights across Europe. It looked like it would last forever. But then, in 1917, everything changed. Russia's revolution toppled Tsar Nicholas II, sparked a civil war, and put the Bolsheviks under Lenin in charge. And these guys, they promised peace, land, and bread. To the Nobels, it was nothing but a disaster. As Swedish foreign business owners, they were now enemies of the new Soviet government. In 1918, Soviet decrees began nationalizing heavy industry, but Branobel scraped by a little longer, paying bribes disguised as loans in those days to delay the inevitable. Then even Emanuel, he fled to Sweden, smuggling the family jewels sewn into his coat lining. In Baku, managers huddled in fear, whispering of these looming Red Army raids. The end came in April 1920. Bolshevik troops took the Nobel sites by force. Oil wells in Baku grabbed at gunpoint, refineries locked up, tankers seized for the Soviet Navy. Factories in what's now St. Petersburg were emptied. Machines shipped off to build weapons. Villa Petrolea turned into a soldier's barrack. Its schools and hospitals became state property. Ships, houses, and private rail cars, all lost. The family got no payment, just orders to leave. One manager later said, something like, nationalization sounds nice, but it's just plain theft. So by 1922, with the USSR fully in control, the Nobel's time in Russia was over. Decades of hard work, Ludwig's supply chains, fair factories, and oil riches that match Rockefeller's disappeared into government books. The family spread out. Emanuel started the small machine shops in Sweden, but their billions were gone. Alfred's dynamite money had already created the Nobel Prizes, a bright spot from his guilt. Ludwig's steady wealth, eaten by communist rules. Still, Ludwig's ideas live on. He showed business can help people, not just use them. Lessons the Soviets ignored, but that inspire today's fair supply chains and worker protections. The revolution took the Nobel Empire, but not its lessons. Build smart and kindly, or watch it fail. Thanks for listening to this series, three-part series. And I ask, just let Ludwig's example light your path. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe these 3 episodes. Every like and subscribe helps me to grow. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.